think that was perfect timing. Shall I kick things off, Susie? Welcome, everybody. We very much appreciate your time, taking some time out of your day to come and have a discussion with us about our economic update for the Downtown Yonge neighborhood. For those of you who've been to these sessions before, we very intentionally keep them very crisp and very focused on key business indicators for the businesses and investors and property owners in our neighborhood in Downtown Yonge. And this is our June update. You'll be seeing a wide range of data. And thank you again for being here. Don't hesitate to reach out to any of us during or after if you have any questions. And right now, I will hand it over to our fantastic presenter, Susie Barbosa-Pizzirusso, who is our Manager of Economic and Community Development. Susie, over to you.
All right, thanks so much, Pauline. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our economic update for Q2 of 2023. Just a quick agenda of the types of data that we'll be looking at today. We'll start off with a brief overview of some national consumer spending patterns specifically from Moneris. So this is looking at debit and credit purchases on Moneris portals. We'll also do a short dive into the Toronto tourism update. This data is from Destination Toronto, so we'll go a little bit into the arrivals and visitor spending. Next, we'll look at visitor analysis specifically for the Downtown Yonge BIA neighborhood and how that's tracking through recovery. We've also got the final numbers from Moneris on 2022 neighborhood spending for the Downtown Yonge BIA neighborhood. So we'll go through a quick analysis of that. And then finally, we'll look at some key findings from companion research projects, specifically from the SRA, which does the occupancy index for the downtown core, which is updated semi-monthly. And we're going on 3 years now. This is the third year of collecting this data. So we'll get a good sense of how office occupancy is tracking over the last few years. We'll look at some pedestrian flow data for the Downtown Yonge neighborhood, specifically January to May of this year in comparison to 2019, and to better understand how recovery is going, as well as the pedestrian flow analysis for Victoria Day long weekend. And then we'll just have a couple of follow-up handouts that we'll send out to attendees that we will go through at the end of the presentation. Of course, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or you can let us know at the end of the presentation. We'll be happy to assist. So first off, we'll start off with some national consumer spending pattern data from Moneris. This is looking at the average transaction size specifically for apparel. And you'll notice in this chart that it starts off at 2019 going through to 2023. You'll see there that apparel has always been very cyclical. Of course, it is usually dependent on the season. A lot of the times it increases through August for the back to school season, and then it kind of dips and it increases again through the holiday season. So you'll see those ebbs and flows here on this chart. I've noted there the very large spike, the abnormal spike is March 2020, when there was a lot of purchasing happening at that point. But you'll notice here from 2021 through to 2023, it has very much leveled out and following a similar pattern to 2019 and pre-pandemic in 2020. So you'll see those yellow circles are those spring peaks, which are usually around April and May. And the red circles are the fall peaks, which are those sort of back to school shopping season in July and August. As of March of this year, the apparel average transaction size was 8% higher this year in comparison to last year. And we are anticipating that it will increase to about $140 per transaction by the end of the spring season this year. So which is great, a great sign that people are slowly starting to spend more on apparel as they're going back to the office or back to their regular activities. The main thing that would sort of stop this is whether there are large changes in spending patterns, especially given the rate of inflation at the moment. Now, this chart is a similar chart, but looking at the average transaction size for restaurant purchases. You'll see here again, there is some seasonality here. The peaks pre-pandemic were always in December for the holiday season. And you'll see that in 2022 and 2021, those peaks returned in a very similar manner. So those red circles that you see there are those seasonal peaks in December. That lowest one in the middle is 2020 right there. And then 2021 and 2022 are tracking really nicely to increased average transaction size at restaurants. And you'll notice that these peaks actually grow incrementally, basically from the September through to the holiday season in December. When we look at foreign spend by business category, now this data is specifically for the province of Ontario, and here we're looking at the average volume change year on year. So you'll see that these are all in the positive numbers and actually quite high. There was quite a lot of increased volume of foreign spend in Ontario in Q1 of 2023. So you'll see here the blue bar is for hotels, the orange bar is for entertainment, and the gray bar is looking at restaurants. So we've seen some really great increases year on year for spend, though the increases are not as dramatic as 2022. However, the volume and transactions continue to improve through the first couple of months of 2023, and they're expecting it to continue to increase as foreign travel continues to grow. Now here we've got the ranking of foreign spend by country for Ontario, and you'll see how it's changed over the first 3 months of 2023. An interesting thing to note is that as of January 5th of this year, the Government of Canada did implement a requirement of a negative COVID-19 test for travelers coming from China, Hong Kong, or Macau. So they are anticipating that that may affect foreign travel from those particular countries, though you'll note here that China is actually still the second highest ranked country for foreign spend in Ontario for the last couple of months. So it seems that while this has been implemented, it has not stopped travelers from those countries and coming into Ontario. You'll see there that the top ranked country for foreign spend is the United States. And as of March, the second highest ranked was China, then the third one is India. United Kingdom rounds up the top 4, and Ukraine is in the top 5. As you'll see, that is the impact of Canada's commitment to supporting those affected in Ukraine. So that's why it is the 5th highest in this ranking here. Now, in terms of arrivals, you'll see here, this is data from Destination Toronto, which is the tourism agency for the city of Toronto, tracking arrivals from 2016 through to 2023. So you'll see that there is quite a lot of seasonality similar to the spend data that we looked at in Moneris. The dips are usually in January, February. I've noted there a couple of peaks and troughs. So you'll see here for January 2019, it was sitting at around 577,000 arrivals, and this is to the airport specifically. And that you'll see in January 2023 at sort of the right-hand side of the chart, we peaked at 467,900 arrivals. So we are just under 20% below what the 2019 level was in terms of arrivals, but really not a significant amount. And they're expecting that these will continue to increase and continue to get better over the coming months. I've also noted here July 2019, where it sort of peaked at 1.1 million arrivals. And July of 2022, we saw just over 700,000 arrivals at the airport just in that month alone. So still slightly lower, but we're anticipating that 2023 will see even higher increases. Now, in terms of visitor spending, and this is across the city of Toronto, again, very, very seasonal. The lowest levels are usually around January, February, as I've noted here. You'll see January 2019 peaking at $407 million of visitor spending in the city. And January 2023, we actually reached 383 million in visitor spending for the city. And this is only 6% lower than January 2019. So again, really seeing those gains over the last year or so in as restrictions have eased, as the state of emergency was stopped and removed, and we're expecting to see these continuing to increase as the year goes on. Now, is there any questions on the data that we've just looked at before we go into the specific visitor analysis data for the Downtown Yonge neighborhood? Seeing none, we will continue on. So here we'll look at a brief overview of the visitor analysis for the Downtown Yonge neighborhood specifically. We've included here a brief definition just so that everyone understands what we mean by visitor in this particular data set. This is anyone who has entered our geofence area during the analysis period. And you'll see here we've got a map with a red line, which is actually denoting the Downtown Yonge BIA boundaries. If you're not familiar with our boundaries, essentially it is the western boundary is Bay Street, the northern boundary is Grosvenor, which is 1 block north of College and Carlton. The eastern boundary is sort of Church Street and Bond Street. And then the southern boundary is Richmond Street, which is just a block south of Queen Street. So that's kind of the area we're looking at today. And anyone who's entered that area is considered a visitor in this data set. So the demographics of the visitors we've been tracking this data for the last couple of years, and this has not changed very much over time. The average 1 to 2 person household with a university degree has stayed relatively stable through the pandemic. White collar, high visible minority is usually who we're seeing in terms of visitors. And the household maintainer is usually young and sitting under 44 years old. The main one that has changed and shifted over the last year or so is the percentage of people who are visiting in the neighborhood who have children at home. Pre-pandemic, this would track around 40 to 42%. And as of early this year, we're seeing that 30 to 35% of these households have children at home. So slightly lower, but really not a large decrease there. In terms of average household income, we did see quite a large increase in the average household income for the visitors coming into the neighborhood in the last couple of months. Pre-pandemic, the average household income would usually sit just under $115,000. However, by February of this year, the average household income for visitors is sitting just under $123,000. So we are definitely seeing a shift in sort of a higher income spending visitor coming into the area now. In terms of visitor volume for the area, you'll see here we've charted out 2019 and 2022 for comparisons. The blue bars are 2019, and those orange bars are 2022. So you'll see here that throughout the year, our visitor volume has been lower than 2019. In total, we saw approximately 31% lower in 2022 versus 2019. However, we did see over 10 million visitors into the neighborhood in that year. So still quite a large amount of people coming and visiting our businesses. And tracking in 2023, we are currently seeing volumes increasing from 2022. So we are expecting to be much closer to 2019 levels and potentially, hopefully, surpassing those levels into this year. Now we've included here, it's a bit fuzzy, so just bear with us. We've included here a sort of heat map to better show where visitors are coming from. You'll see there, the darker the color, the more people are coming from those specific areas. You'll see that near Pearson Airport is quite high, near the Downsview Airport is quite high, and we've included in this next slide here a sort of more zoomed in shot of the downtown core. And you'll see there the red line is denoting where our boundaries are, where the Downtown Yonge BIA is located. And we've highlighted here a couple of areas that were in the darker purple color, which may be of interest. So you'll see there on the top left is an area around Mount Dennis. Then if we go further south into the map near Spadina and Bloor, you'll see that U of T there is quite high and has always tracked quite high even through the pandemic. When we looked at the charts over the last few years, the U of T area was always pretty dark purple. St. Jamestown is another one that was always sort of in the dark purple range. And then the last one that we noted sort of in the top right area is Leaside. That one's a new one that we saw in this news data set that we hadn't seen in the past. Now, in terms of how far visitors are coming to the neighborhood, when we looked at this data in between March and August of 2020, we saw that 50% of our visitors only lived within a 26-minute drive, and 70% of them lived within a 33-minute drive. Now, you'll see here in this orange box, this has actually increased quite a bit. When we looked at this data set for September 2022 through February of 2023, we're seeing that 50% of our visitors actually live now within a 32-minute drive, and 70% of them actually live within a 41-minute drive. So as you saw in that map, sort of those darker areas really kind of spreading across the city of Toronto and not just focusing those downtown core. We are seeing a large increase of people sort of coming from other areas other than the downtown core. Now, this was sort of the million-dollar question. We were asked this a lot. When are people coming to the neighborhoods? What days of the week are the busiest? When do we see the most people? So in terms of visitors, it's actually an interesting spread here. So you'll see here it is split out by day of the week. The blue bar is the percentage of all visits, and when so if they're happening on that specific day, it's the sort of the percent of visits that are happening on that day. And that line that we're seeing across the chart is actually what the level was for 2019, so pre-pandemic. So you'll see there, interestingly, our visits on Mondays are actually higher than pre-pandemic. Tuesday is tracking about the same at around 14% of all visits happening on a Tuesday. Wednesdays is slightly lower than pre-pandemic levels. Interestingly, Thursday, Friday are also just at 2019 levels and are actually the highest in terms of percentage of visits by day of the week. They're both tracking at just under 16% of all visits happening on Thursdays and Fridays. And then Saturdays and Sundays are sort of decreased there and slightly lower on Saturdays than pre-pandemic levels. But overall, we're seeing our visitor sector really leveling out to pre-pandemic levels pretty nicely, and we're expecting this to increase as the year goes on. Any questions on the visitor data before we move on to the neighborhood spend analysis? I don't see any, so we're going to continue on here. Just a quick look at the methodology here. This is data only looking at transactions made on Moneris payment terminals through debit or credit purchases between January and December of last year. Moneris estimates that approximately 40% of their transactions across Canada are made on their payment terminals. So it is not a perfect indicator of overall neighborhood spend, but it does give us a good idea of where people are spending their money in the neighborhood. We have divided as the data into three sectors. When we're looking at the sector specific data, retail includes apparel, household, department stores, and other retail. Services will include things like professional services, drugstores, health and financial and other services. And lastly, food services, restaurant and grocery services there. So in terms of total dollar spend across all sectors for 2022, we saw some really great gains throughout Q2 through the Q4 of last year. And we saw just over $230 million in neighborhood spend throughout the year. So really great gains overall. The state of emergency was actually terminated in the city of Toronto in May of 2022, which could have helped see that increase in spend that you see there on the graph in Q2 through to Q3 and Q4. Interestingly, we saw that December of 2022 was actually 11% of the total spend across all of the entire year. So a lot of the spend happened in December, of course, due to the holiday shopping and the holiday spending as well. Now, when we look at transaction volumes by sector here, so this is the number of transactions happening on the payment portals. and we've separated out by sector. So the blue line will be services, the orange line is food services, and the gray line is retail. So you'll see there that all three of them made pretty great gains from Q1 through to Q4 of 2022. Services saw a 12% increase in December compared to January. Retail saw the highest gain, which you'll see there at just over 370% increase in December compared to January. Again, this is probably due to that holiday spend. And lastly, food service also, you'll see there is the highest in terms of transaction volume for the entire year, but specifically in December, we saw a 350% increase in spend in food service compared to January of last year. Now, the top postal codes by dollar spend, this is one of the most popular data sets that we get asked about is where are people coming from, but specifically what postal codes are they coming from? So we've listed here the top 10 postal codes in terms of percentage of total neighborhood spend. So you'll see there the top postal code is M5G, which is the neighborhood around University to Bay and College to Queen. So they represent 6% of the total neighborhood spend. The second highest is M5B, which is the neighborhood around Yonge to Jarvis and Carlton to Queen. So really the neighborhoods that are right beside our area within a 5 to 10 minute walk. That one accounts for about 5% of the neighborhood spend. And then you'll see all the other ones sort of rounding up the top 10. Again, all located within that 10 to 15 minute walk of our area. An interesting thing to note, which you'll see there on the screen, is actually that these top 10 postal codes account for 25% of the total dollar spend in downtown Yonge in 2022. Now, in terms of average transaction size, this is where the story changes a little bit. And you'll see here, we've split it out by sector. So the first graph is the top postal codes by average transaction size for services for the year. The second one is for retail, and the third one is for food service. And you'll note there that a lot of the postal codes are not Toronto postal codes. So we did see, and this was a trend throughout the entire data set through 2022, that in terms of average transaction size, the higher transaction sizes were actually from visitors coming from outside of the city. So a lot of these were visitors from other provinces such as BC, Quebec, Nova Scotia, but some were interprovincial. We're in neighborhoods such as Sault Ste. Marie, Windsor, and other areas in southwestern Ontario. So this data set will be included in a handout that we'll send you post session. So you'll be able to dive deeper into this data and really take a look at each sector and which postal codes these are. In turn, we just wanted to sort of graph it and show you the map specifically of what those top 4 postal codes look like. So you'll see there, Yonge Street is sort of that middle line there between M5G and M5B. So these top 4 postal codes make up 17% of the total neighborhood spend. So really the story here is that the people who are coming back the most often to the neighborhood are really those people within sort of a 10-15 minute walk. But the ones who are spending the most per transaction are really the ones who are sort of coming from out of town, coming on vacation or business for business reasons, and coming in and spending more per transaction that way. Now, any questions for the neighborhood spend data before we go through some of the brief key findings from companion research projects? I don't see anything, so we'll go on. So for this first one is the SRA Office Occupancy Index. So this is looking at specifically at what offices are like people working in their offices 5 days a week. So you'll see here we started tracking this data in May of 2020, and the graph ends at May of 2023. It is currently sitting at 49%. And just to give you an idea, pre-pandemic offices were usually sitting at around 77% office occupancy. So we're slowly but surely getting there, but it seems like it has stabilized and leveled off at this level for now. We did include here briefly our development map. This was updated in May of 2023. You'll see here there is a lot of residential development coming to the neighborhood. The blue ones are the ones that are sort of ongoing or under review, and the red ones are the developments that have been completed. And then the yellow lines are sort of road or infrastructure projects that are coming into the neighborhood in the next couple of years. So you'll see that there's a lot of growth, a lot of development coming to the neighborhood. We will send the development map along as well, so you can take a closer look at what developments are near your business or near your area, and you can kind of gain a little bit more of an understanding of what's coming into the pipeline. Now, this is some of my favorite data sets. These are the traffic flow analysis for the neighborhood. This is collected by Springboard using electronic counters along Yonge Street. We have been collecting this data for many years now, and we have a total of 12 counters located at the major intersections along Yonge Street. So the data that we'll look at today is total traffic by day of the week, and we'll specifically look at 2019, 2021, and 2022. We'll look at some total traffic data for January to May for those same years, and again, that Victoria Day long weekend pedestrian flows. So here we split it out by weekday. So again, you'll see at the bottom, you'll see Monday through Friday, and then these are actual counts of people walking on Yonge Street across all of our counters for the years 2019, 2021, and 2022. So you'll see here that weekdays on average in 2022 were 22% lower than 2019, but again, not a significant decrease. And we are seeing this in 2023, actually tracking significantly higher than we were in 2022. In terms of weekends, you'll see here, weekends on average were 11% lower in 2022 compared to 2019. They do tend to be slightly lower than the weekday counts, though we are still seeing very good pedestrian flows through the weekends as well. Now, in terms of the pedestrian counts by month, you'll see here we have January through May, and again, the same years, 2019, 2022. And we've also included here some 2023 data, so you can see what I'm talking about, we are seeing really great gains this year. So those blue bars are 2019, the orange are 2022, and the gray are 2023. So you'll see here that, interestingly, January, February, and April were all in 2023 essentially level with 2019 pedestrian flows, which is really fantastic. We were very excited to see this. And March and May were slightly lower. However, really at this point, it seems to be more of just sort of a flow, changes in flow, as opposed to significant decreases due to a specific reason. So we're really sort of seeing those pedestrian flows level out to pre-pandemic levels, which is, I think, really exciting to see. And I'm sure if you've all walked the street over time with the last couple of months, I'm sure you will have noticed that as well. And lastly here, we've got the Victoria Day long weekend, similar story to the data that I just showed you in terms of pedestrian flows for the Friday to the Monday of Victoria Day long weekend. We are, for 2023, which is that gray bar, we were only 8% lower than 2019, tracking at just under 800,000 pedestrians for that weekend. So really great gains there, and we're seeing more and more gains through these long weekends as they sort of come on through the year. So any questions on that data before we sort of go through the follow-up handouts and through any of the other exciting data sets? Nothing else? Okay, perfect. So as I mentioned, we've got the economic newsletter for Q2 of 2023, which we will email you as a follow-up document along with the development map. But very excitedly, we've actually just launched 3 infographics that are sector specific, really diving into data specific to food services, retail, and services, which are the top 3 sectors in our area. So we will also include those 3 infographics, and they are actually also available on our website. So if you're ever looking for this particular information, you can find it under the research tab on our website. Now,
Susie, I think David's got a question.
Oh yes, David, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question. Well, I just couldn't figure out how to raise my hand, which is kind of embarrassing. But anyways, hi. I have a question. So, I think we've talked about this before, Susie, but what I find really interesting, and as I'm like the person in the city dealing with like the downtown's dying thing, right, with the office vacancies and the pressure to convert, and yeah, at the same time, your pedestrian count numbers and your spending numbers sort of show that's not necessarily happening. What do you think is driving that? Like, why is there such a big difference? I mean, like, I'm not saying the offices are not half empty. Like, I'm not disputing that number from SRA, but like, clearly Yonge Street's, doing well. And so that's part one. Part two, is there anything us at the city can learn from what is happening there that might help other parts of downtown, or, when we're thinking about strategies to respond to this?
Pauline, did you want to?
Yes, did you see?
Take a
I didn't even try with the electronic hand. I just used my actual hand. So, David, I think the first thing that's really struck us was what a huge impact it is for downtown Yonge that we're as multi-sectoral as we are. So, and there are other parts of the financial district, it's much more office towers. There's much more of a focus just on employment spaces. We have the benefit that we have a pretty significant residential population. We have a high level of visitors. We also have the office sector, but we also have hotels and tourists. And the one that really made a big impact was when Toronto Metropolitan University came back in the September of last year. Everybody came back in person, all faculty, all students, and there was a visible change in the neighborhood as a result of that. So I would argue, one, that our multi-sectoralism, if I can put it that way, our multi-sectoral nature, and the fact that we had a campus that was back in person last year had a huge impact. But I also would say that I'm not sure you can always correlate that high foot traffic means more spending. We have seen good spending numbers, but as you saw from the Moneris data, we only have them for 2022. We don't have them from before COVID or in any comparative way. So I think that part of it is going to say, so we're seeing more foot traffic, we're seeing what looks like better spending, but we haven't actually been able to test that yet. So that would be the first thing I would say. Susie, do you want to add anything to that?
I think what's also important, given that you had mentioned the office occupancy, we are seeing our traffic levels, our pedestrian levels similar to 2019, but given the fact that the office towers are not full, the question we're trying to answer is that who are these people walking on Yonge Street if these offices are not at the same level, or the office workers are not back at the same level as they were in 2019. Clearly there are still people walking on Yonge Street, but it seems like the type of person that is walking on Yonge Street has shifted. And as Pauline had mentioned, that seems like the spending is also shifting, and we're just trying to figure out what that would mean for us.
And I was muted. And actually, just as a corollary to that, one of the things that kind of really blows us away a little bit is that our general traffic flow on Yonge Street pre-COVID was about 45 million people a year going north and south. With the same counters, with the same methodology, with the same system, we counted 60 million in 2022. So it hasn't just been a small increase. That's a pretty significant increase of 15 million people. So I think we can't answer as much as we would like to. I think we've got some theories. And David, if you have some theories, hey, we're all over listening to them.
I've got lots of theories, but too many.
Sounds like it's time for coffee. Right. Anyone else have any theories about why that might be happening? Much higher foot traffic, but maybe not spending in the same way?
Just a thought that maybe because in 2022 we could finally travel again, but interest rates are so high and the cost of living is so exorbitant at the moment that we can't spend as much.
Yeah, that's a good point. So maybe people are still coming and visiting and maybe even doing more, but just not spending the same amount.
Yeah, I think I see similar to what you're saying, like definitely the residential. And I think the issue, like the issue for downtown Yonge is how local serving are you and how destination serving are you? And you had the visitation numbers. I think that was just unique visitors. So just showing at least they visited once. What you'd like to see is the frequency of visitation. And that came through when you just looked at the high concentration of spending just locally. So yeah, do you need more grocery stores or do you need more Nordstroms or, you know, back and forth, that kind of thing. But definitely the residential, hugely impacting on the traffic. And then, yeah, TMU's decision that we are definitely going to be an urban campus and not a remote campus or anything like that. And so making those policy decisions to be an in-class type university. You see that impact of the students on the street kind of thing. But yeah, I think some of the numbers, yeah, they don't kind of, the high visitation on Mondays doesn't kind of track sometimes, or yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because if we talk anecdotally to our members who have restaurants on Yonge Street, they always say that Monday and Friday are their worst days. But then when we look at the stats, that as Susie showed, the foot traffic doesn't look that bad on Mondays and Fridays. So there's some disconnect there that we're still trying to figure out, and hopefully over time we'll have enough data to understand what it is. Susie, back to you.
Yes, just the last piece we wanted to mention to everyone while we've got you here is that the Downtown Yonge BIA is in the middle of a strategic planning process. And we are inviting you all to attend our 3 open houses that we will be holding over the next month or so. We will have 2 in person and 1 virtual. 1 is actually tomorrow morning. So if you would like to register and join us, they are drop-in format, so you don't have to stay for the full thing. You can come for a couple of minutes, give us your thoughts on our draft strategic priorities and initiatives, give us your feedback. We will have refreshments at the in-person one, so if that entices you to come say hi in person, please feel free to join us June 8th, which is tomorrow, 9 to 11. The other in-person one is June 20th, 5 to 7 p.m. And we will have 1 virtual one, which is next week, June 14th, 1:30 to 3. So if you'd like to register, please go on our website, downtownyonge.com /strategic-plan, or feel free to reach out to me or Pauline, and we can get you registered for a session. So that's all we've got for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you found this helpful. We have recorded the session, so we will be uploading it to YouTube, and we will send out the link to all the registered attendees. If you wanted to share it with your staff or your colleagues, please feel free, and you will be receiving an email from me shortly with all of those follow-up materials, which include the economic newsletter, those 3 infographics, and our development map. So thanks so much, everyone. We hope you have a great day.
And thank you, Susie. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.